Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Thomas Lewandowski. I am very excited to explore with you today John Milton's Paradise Lost. It's a bit of an aspirational read. I know a lot of people like to swing for the fences when it comes to reading the classics, and Paradise Lost is definitely one of those. So congratulations on your willingness to take a deep dive into something that's really challenging but really rewarding. And what I've created here, so this is a great edition. I would recommend this edition. This is the Norton Critical Edition of Paradise Lost. You can find it in the links description below. It's a great text. It's very clear. It's got all kinds of the kind of footnotes that help you make meaning from the text, and then it's got these amazing critical essays. It's got the whole history of criticism back from like romantic criticism, like what is Coleridge, Wordsworth, what do these people think? It's really great. It's very brilliant. It's going to help so much with like understanding the Western canon. That's a big deal for people. It's a big deal for me. And so you can get that, you can order it, or I've got these copies. These are also linked. This is book 1 and book 4. I think one of the things that is helpful is you don't have to read it sequentially. You don't have to start with book 1 and then read all the way through book 12. That's not really necessary. You can, book 1 is great to grab onto, and then book 4, and then I think book 8 and 9 after that. There are 12 books. They're all here. They are 12 of them, and here's a little synopsis. So you can get a copy of this as well. So if you look at the description, you'll probably see some writing, and you'll also see links to some things that you can download. I just want to help you have a good experience. So for you, if that means downloading this and following along, maybe taking some notes or highlighting things as I talk through it. Most of this video is going to be me talking through this. I might make some later videos that look specifically at book 1 and book 4, but let's get into it. Epic narrative poem in 12 books. So the story is huge, and the language is incredibly formal and ornate because, well, John Milton is who he is, and the subject is so serious and important. So what is the subject? I guess it would be logical now to move to the story, and I'll read these. There are 12 books, and here's what happens in each book. The poem is written from a Christian perspective, but that's not the most important thing, that it's written from a Christian perspective. You can read this if you are a Christian. You can certainly read this if you're not a Christian. The story and the questions that it asks are great from a religious perspective, but they're also great from a secular perspective. So Satan obviously is a figure in Christian theology, but he's also a representation of what is dark in human ambition, and what is dark in human motivations, and the desire to pride and ambition and intelligence and deception. All of these things mixed together. Those are Satan's characteristics. He's quite charismatic. He's a wonderful speaker in this poem. He's a brilliant orator, and he's a liar, and he is ambitious, and he is hurt. He has his feelings hurt in this poem, and his response is revenge. And so in book 1, we have Satan and fallen angels wake in hell, which is really a fantastic scene. I mean, it's just breathtaking when they wake up after being thrown into hell, and they start to collect themselves, and they have huge bodies, and they have wings, and it's really the imagery that's used by Milton to describe all of this is, you can pretty quickly find the reasons that it's regarded as maybe the masterpiece of English literature, of English verse, and I'm going to just go ahead and say it. This is number 2 for why read it. And in some important ways, Milton was a better poet than Shakespeare. Shakespeare is like this strange preternatural, incredibly creative, intuitive. What he's able to do with poetry is like 18 backflips off the high diving board, and you're like, there's no way he's going to land it, and then he lands it. And Shakespeare does that, and it's like a miracle that he was able to do what he did with language. Milton is more like methodical. He's like the guy who worked his entire life building a tower, and in the end, what he built was a perfect tower. And that's just different than what Shakespeare does. But as far as like technical prowess and like just sheer, I don't know, magnitude and scope, Paradise Lost has got some features. So you could definitely put Paradise Lost right up there with Macbeth, right up there with King Lear, as far as like masterpieces of English language literature. So number one, Satan and fallen angels wake in hell after being defeated by God. They organize themselves for revenge. So we're going to talk somewhat as I move through this video about like themes and the themes that emerge. The militarism is a theme because Satan and Beelzebub, his chief lieutenant, have an army. They have an army of angels, and so there's very much like war metaphors, the war of good versus evil, and that's a theme that's very powerful throughout the work. Number two, book 2, the Devil's Council in Hell. And there's like a rumor. So time is very interesting. I should maybe do another video just on time with a diagram, because time moves in very interesting ways. The book 1 occurs, the perspective of the narrator in book 1 is after humanity exists. It's not that far away from Milton himself telling the story, so it's telling the story in 1660, but the action that's being communicated, and a lot of it is communicated through dialogue. So Satan speaks to Beelzebub, Beelzebub replies, they speak to all of the fallen angels. This action takes place before Earth existed. And so time is very interesting, and in book 2, towards the end of book 1 and in book 2, the fallen angels talk about this rumor of Earth existing. There's this place, I think it's called Earth. It's going to be created, and God is going to populate it with these creatures that he loves more than anybody else. And they're almost angels, but they're not quite. I think they might be called humans. So that's kind of happens in book 1 and book 2. And Satan decides he's going to look for Earth to see what he can do. And these are the things they discuss. They discuss in book 1, well, should we fight God again? Should we take our army back up there and see what happens? And they're like, probably not, we'd probably lose again, but maybe we don't have to give up. Maybe there's another way to fight. Number 3, book 3, God and Jesus observe Satan flying around space. Jesus volunteers. So in book 3, we see God's perspective and we hear God's voice. And interestingly, one of the most interesting criticisms of this poem that's been a criticism for 200 years, in fact, well, maybe it's a criticism, but maybe it's a strength, is that Satan's character is very, very charismatic. There's just a word for it, is slick. Satan is slick. Where God is not as well rendered. He's not as captivating as a character. But God's perspective on events, God knows what's going to happen. God knows what Satan is doing. God knows what Satan is going to do. God knows what humankind is going to do. And God realizes that he's going to need someone to atone for the sin of Adam and Eve, because they will be tempted. They will eat the apple. They will get thrown out of the garden. He knows that because that's God's perspective, which is interesting because that also becomes the reader of the poem's perspective. So it's in book 3 that Jesus volunteers to be sacrificed, to be the lamb that is slaughtered in order for the humans, to represent humans, to be a human who atones for the sin of leaving the garden, which opens up the way to return to paradise and heaven, eternal heaven, salvation through Jesus. That's in book 3 that we learn about that. And then we revisit Satan in 4. And in book 4, Satan lands in Eden with his feelings. And man, is he having some feelings and doubt. And so there's a very powerful, in book 4, exploration of motivation. And it's Satan's motivation. So we're always like, this is a supernatural character. But the extent to which we could use that character as a representative of human emotions, human motivations, I think, from my perspective, that you can use Satan for that. That you can see what Satan does, and you can say, well, that's how humans react sometimes. That's how humans feel. That's how a human works through thoughts and feelings. And that's what we have in book 4, is Satan working through thoughts and feelings. In the end, he thinks about it. He thinks about maybe asking for forgiveness, maybe returning to God, but he can't do it. He can't give up because his ambition is so much, and his sense of injured pride is so much. So it is wonderfully useful to see what it is that trips up Satan, because Satan is such a talented entity, and it's pride, and it's ambition, and it's the sense of injured merit. It's the sense of, I didn't get what I deserved, and because I didn't get it, I'll show you what I'm capable of. That's kind of what's driving Satan. And this just desire to be free. Satan wants to make his own choices. He wants to decide what he will do, where he will go. We have Adam and Eve described, also beautiful. Eve recalls her own creation. She remembers it. And Satan starts tempting her in a dream. But then he's scared off by angels. So in book 4, we get like this little, like, you think maybe this is where Eve is going to taste the apple, but that's not the case. Then God recognizes what's going on. He wants to give humans every opportunity to make the right choice. Free will is a big theme in this place. So we have militarization, we have war, we have evil, we have motivation, and we most certainly have free will. So God sends Raphael, an angel, to talk with Adam, mostly with Adam, about the danger that they're in, about Satan and his plans, so that Adam is armed. There's a militaristic metaphor, so that Adam is armed against temptation. And then he tells the story of Satan, so that Adam has all the knowledge that he needs to protect himself and Eve. And then so 5 and 6 and 7 are all Raphael and Adam in conversation. Raphael continues the story. Satan loses. We learn that it was, in fact, Jesus who is the thunder. Jesus brings the thunder and is the actual most powerful and potent weapon on the battlefield for God. And he is the reason that Satan was defeated in heaven. Raphael tells Adam the story of Earth's creation. Adam is kind of asking questions of Raphael. And they get to a certain point where Raphael's like, stop being so curious, man. I mean, you don't have to have all the answers. And then Raphael leaves. That is when Satan returns, tempts Eve. Eve tastes the fruit. So this is book 9. So this is when she actually tastes the fruit. Then she shares it with Adam. Jesus comes down and judges Adam and Eve, and sin and death enter the earth. Everything changes. Snakes is when Satan returns to hell and celebrates, and he thinks everything is awesome because they won, and now they're going to be able to pollute the earth, which is true, but they all turn into snakes while they are in the midst of celebrating. They lose their angelic forms, and that's a reminder that they are just playing a part in something that God has conceived from the beginning. Book 11, Jesus stands Adam and Eve. My students said that's not really how we use stands anymore. But anyways, Jesus goes back to God and says, hey, Adam and Eve, I want to represent them. I believe that they are truly sorry. Michael arrives in Eden with news, and then Michael tells the future to Adam and Eve, and they're kind of like accept their fate, and they finally leave the garden in 12. And so that's a synopsis of the story. Moving around, so where do we have here? We have all things that I think will help. You know, that's what it's all about, is getting some help. So seeing where Milton is and the progression of the English giants of Western canon is important. We have iambic pentameter over here. This is like a specific verse form. So it's a epic narrative poem, which means epic is like, it is not like a tragedy where we have a hero making a mistake or a hero whose circumstance line up against the hero, and even though the hero is heroic, bad things happen to the hero. It's not like that, although some people look at Satan as an anti-hero, and like there's definitely been analysis done in that direction. But epic is the word. Epic is just huge in scope. He's trying to answer all the questions that matter most from his understanding of the world theologically, you know, from Milton's understanding theologically, Christian perspective. It's a narrative poem, which means it tells a story, and it's in 12 books. But it's written in a specific verse form, which happens to be English heroic verse without rhyme. That's what that is what Milton calls it. We also call that blank verse. It's iambic pentameter. So iambic pentameter is what? Well, here's any of these lines that we picked out over here or that are over here are iambic pentameter, which means we have iambs, which are ba, 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 ba. This is emphasis, this is accent. So a word like seduced is naturally has an accent on the deuced. And garden is the opposite, garden. You know, we don't say garden. Oh, I will go to the garden. And poetry takes advantage and gives very, very careful attention to the way that language is spoken. And that's what it is. It is an art form in which the instrument that is being played is the human vocal cords and lungs and air, and the sound of the words coming out of your mouth is what it's all about. So iambic pentameter has 5 metrical feet, and there's something about that 5, that emphasis on 5, that is able to capture the essence and of human speech. And that's why Chaucer used it, and Shakespeare used it, and Milton used it, particularly in English. So we have in 1400, this is Middle English, before English was fully realized as a language that we currently speak today, before modern English existed. We had Geoffrey Chaucer. One that April with his shores sote, the draught of March hath persed to the rote, and bathed every vein in switch liquor, of which virtue engendered is the fleur. And so, you know, how do you read poetry? That's like very briefly, you do not read it like this. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang. You do not read poetry like that. That is overemphasizing the rhythm. That's overemphasizing the iambs to the extent that you sound not good. So this is Shakespeare's 73rd sonnet. It's a beautiful one of my very, very favorites. It is written in iambic pentameter, and it sounds like this. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. So very importantly, these are called enjambments. I think I have that mentioned over here somewhere. So punctuation at the end of every line is very important. I suppose now I can move on over to here, because here I am, punctuation. So we construct meaning. This is kind of like a bottom-up approach where we look at the very smallest things. There is a level of density, especially in like an epic narrative poem like Paradise Lost, that nothing really compares to. Nothing that you read in prose, no novels. You know, if you have other aspirational texts that you're considering reading, like War and Peace or anything like that, the density that we have in this type of poetry. And this is why I love to teach it, and why I think it's fully worth the investment of time and energy that it requires, is because it's English. It's English at the very best and the highest level of density that we have in English for meaning, for the construction of meaning. So what matters? Punctuation matters, words matter, phrases matter, lines matter, sentences matter, and finally, verse paragraphs matter. So here we have book 1, and in book 1, I'm just going to move around a little bit. These are paragraphs. This is paragraph 9, this is paragraph 10, this is paragraph 8. And so each of these divisions of meaning is there to help you construct meaning. So it's so hard. It is so easy to feel overwhelmed with what you are trying to make meaning from, that like sentences are your very, very, very good friends because they allow you to take a break. You can get to a period and say, oh, now I can breathe for a second before I move on. So sentences are very important, and these verse paragraphs are very important as well. Frequently, when speakers are speaking in between paragraphs, that's when the next speaker will take over. I think now that I'm at 20 minutes, I know I haven't covered everything that is here. I will return another time and talk a little bit further about each one of these, and then look at book 1, then look at book 2. If you made it to the end of this video, consider liking or subscribing. I would like to make more of these. I think I can make more of these, but we'll have to see how my audience and my subscribers are doing. If you are subscribed, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah, I would like to make more videos, and we will see if I actually do.